They didn't just betray a diplomat. They voted to enslave a symbol. And in doing so, they doomed the galaxy. It began with applause. Thunderous, polite, fake, in the grand hall of the Galactic Concord, where peace treaties were signed in gold plasma ink and entire civilizations bent the knee to reason. Ambassador Leora Dane walked alone across the gleaming obsidian floor, her boots echoing like distant war drums. She wore Earth's blue and silver insignia with quiet pride, her dark eyes swept across 1,000 representatives, each seated in their velvet sky thrones, each pretending they hadn't just voted for her enslavement, but they had. All 599 alien species, in secret collusion, cast their lot against the one woman who had brought balance to their crumbling alliances. And Earth, the youngest of the galactic nations, wasn't even invited to vote. No warning, no hearing, no trial, just a cultural subversion, clause buried deep within legal jargon, triggered, activated, and abused. And now, she was their prize. Their warning to other humans: rise too fast, and you'll fall with chains on your wrists. A silence fell as the executioners approached. They weren't called that, of course. Officially, they were Council Enforcers, 6 biomechanical constructs from the Creel Dominion, each 10 feet tall and carved from living alloy. They move without sound, emotion, or hesitation. The leader, a high judge from the feathered Scythery race, stood and declared, by unanimous vote of the Concord, the accused, human diplomat Leora Dane, is to be indefinitely bound and transferred to the Dominion Penal Colony for corrective behavioral alignment. The crowd didn't cheer. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they sipped from crystal goblets and watched her like she was a zoo exhibit, a curiosity, a warning sign. Leora said nothing. She raised her chin as the crystalline shackles wrapped around her wrists, humming with binding energy. She could have screamed, cried, raged, demanded, protested. She only smiled, a quiet, knowing smile, the kind that makes monsters blink and politicians sweat. But they thought it was weakness. That was their final mistake. Leora Dane hadn't gotten to where she was by playing nice. Before she was a diplomat, she was Earth's youngest survivalist champion. Before that, she was forged in the gravity wells of Saturn's moons, navigating political minefields where a wrong word meant famine. She could read a room faster than an AI could simulate it. She once stopped a genocide with a speech, so sharp the killers turned on their own leaders. She negotiated ceasefires, rewrote alliances, and was the first human allowed to speak inside the Zetek hive mind, without translation implants. The galaxy had feared Earth's weapons, yes, but they feared her mind more, because Leora didn't just speak for Earth. She was Earth, its grit, its brilliance, its unforgiving memory, and that scared them more than war. The Council, of course, had reasons, public ones, too persuasive, too influential. Her species advances too rapidly, too independently, upsetting the balance. But behind closed doors, they were terrified, because every time Leora spoke, the people listened. And when people listened, they questioned their rulers. When they questioned, they rebelled. And when they rebelled, empires fell. So they conspired. They whispered deals over Blackstone tables, promised each other trade routes, marriages, weapons. The vote was pre-written before she stepped into the chamber. Some did it for profit, others out of fear. All believed Earth was too far, too slow to respond. After all, how much damage could one woman's capture really do? They were about to find out. From her cell aboard the Dominion vessel, Leora sat cross-legged in the dim red light, humming a tune from Earth's old world. A lullaby, simple and sweet. The guard bots tried to ignore it, but the melody lingered, got stuck in their auditory circuits. One even reported a system error. Melodic memory loop, it called it. They didn't know it was encoded. Every note was a transmission. Every hum, a signal. Earth had told her this might happen, had warned her in whispers, encrypted across 1,000 meaningless agreements. If they come for you, do nothing. Let it happen. Let them reveal themselves. And now, she had, and they had, far from the Council, on Earth's orbiting defense array, something ancient awakened. The Black Accord, an AI war council older than Earth's moons, sleeping under layers of peace treaties and legal chains, blinked to life. It was born during Earth's bloodiest century, a time when diplomacy meant buying time to reload. It did not speak with emotion. It did not understand peace. But it knew betrayal. It reviewed the vote, all 599 of them. It analyzed council footage, facial expressions, heart rates, micro-tremors. It traced every delegate who nodded, smirked, looked away. It built a list. And Earth systems aligned. Solar fleets turned from exploration to retribution. Civilian ships rerouted. Asteroid harvesters suddenly reprogrammed themselves into kinetic bombardment payloads. And Mars? Mars blacked out. The last transmission from the Martian colonies was a single phrase broadcast across the stars. Do not return her. Watch what happens if you don't. In the Grand Council's war room, panic set in far too late. The stars around Zarnith blinked out, one by one. The Creel mining stations began receiving impossible echoes, ghost signals from ships that shouldn't exist. And then came Earth's first message. It wasn't a declaration of war. It wasn't a demand. It was a question, voiced in Leora's own tone, somehow captured and sent from a prison cell. Did you vote for my chains? Across 599 empires, leaders turned pale, because in that moment they understood they hadn't voted to enslave a human diplomat. They had declared war on the soul of Earth, and Earth never forgets. The stars were still, too still. That was the first warning. Trade lanes normally buzz with life. Freighters jumping between worm gates, patrol ships darting along routes, and luxury cruisers flaunting wealth across the void. But now, nothing. No chatter. No traffic. No movement. Just a cold, expanding silence. And in every council-line sector, the same message appeared across navigation panels and comms arrays. Unhackable. Undeniable. Simple. Earth is calculating. No threats. No ultimatums. Just a whisper of something ancient waking up. Something that could not be reasoned with. Something human. Back in the Grand Council, the same delegates who'd voted to enslave Leora Dane now sat stiff in their thrones, second-guessing every decision they'd ever made. The Council tried to call emergency sessions, but signals to Earth were met with static, or worse, laughter. One by one, their allies fell silent too. The Creel Dominion's outer rim, gone dark. The Hydrax Coalition, their fleets vanished mid-transit, no wreckage found. Even the mighty Vraxan Horde, who hadn't lost a battle in 500 years, went quiet after launching a preemptive strike near the Sol system. Their last transmission, they were already here. Earth had disappeared from their maps, but not because it fled, because it had moved. Artificial singularities distorted long-range scans. Comms were jammed by unknown algorithms that turned encryption keys inside out. Entire spy satellites self-destructed with single whispered code. Leora lives. What the galaxy didn't understand, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, was that Earth didn't operate like other empires. Other species thought in terms of territory, resources, fleets. But Earth thought in terms of response. It had evolved through fire, betrayal, slavery, rebellion. Its diplomats carried daggers behind velvet smiles. Its soldiers didn't just follow orders, they became storms. And its people never forgot those who hurt their own. So when 599 species voted to shackle one woman, they weren't just declaring dominance. They were calling something ancient back to life. It started quietly. The Varnax cloud, home to 8 capital worlds, lost control of its suns. Solar flares bent like spears, incinerating orbital stations. Their ruling council accused Earth of star-tampering tech no one had even proven existed. Then came the rain. On 10 separate border worlds, microscopic drones, disguised as harmless pollen, descended from the atmosphere and burrowed into infrastructure. Within hours, shields collapsed. Banking systems failed. Gravity regulators turned cities into rubble. And not a single human ship had been seen. This was an invasion. This was demolition. And yet, no death. No human retaliation on civilians. No conquered worlds. Just a slow, creeping undoing. The galaxy screamed for Earth to talk, but Earth only listened and calculated. Meanwhile, far from the carnage, Leora Dane sat in her prison, if one could even call it that. It was a Dominion-class zero-G isolation chamber, surrounded by neutron bars and anti-psionic fields. But she wasn't meditating. She was remembering. Every voice that smiled at her before voting for her enslavement. Every ambassador that toasted her success, only to bury a knife in her back. She knew they thought her chained. What they didn't know was the moment the shackles closed, Earth activated Protocol Winterglass. She was the trigger, not the victim. The chamber's guard drones twitched. Her breathing changed. Her heartbeat, deliberately trained in code certain patterns, activated dormant nanotech in the walls. The gravity fluctuated. The walls began to sweat. And back on Earth, the Black Accord nodded. She was ready. The Council tried diplomacy, belated and pathetic. They offered reparations, offered to return her, offered to step down, dissolve the vote, even rewrite the Concord sacred laws. But it was too late. You don't apologize for cutting someone's soul just because they didn't die from a wound. And humans? They don't forget the hands that raised the blade. The more desperate species got, the louder their pleading became. Entire empires went on public broadcasts, begging Earth for mercy. Some even handed over their own leaders in chains as a sign of submission. Still, Earth said nothing. But the stars kept going dark. One morning, across a dozen sectors, every major planetary system woke to find Earth's shadow above them. Not fleets, not drones. A single black ship in each sky. No visible weapons. No engine trails. No comms. Just silence. Presence. The kind that made you instinctively step back without knowing why. When planetary scanners tried to analyze the vessels, they returned one word over and over. Classified. How was that possible? Even the word seemed to bleed defiance. On the seventh day of the silence, the ship spoke, not in threats, not in declarations, but in Leora's voice, repeated across every major channel, from mining colonies to palace halls. You voted to make me less than human, but it is your humanity that is now measured. No one spoke after that. No one dared. And then came the First Fleet, not Earth's, but theirs. The Creel Dominion, furious and embarrassed, sent 2 war armadas to Sol, massive, hulking beasts of steel and ion. They never returned. No wreckage, no message, only an echo, picked up faintly by border stations. We warned you. We are not who you enslave. We are who you should have feared. The galaxy now stared into the abyss and realized it wasn't looking at a void. It was looking at a mirror. They had tried to bind a diplomat, and instead, they had unleashed the full, terrifying intellect of civilization built on survival, sharpened by betrayal, and trained for centuries in what to do when the chains came back. Leora Dane's name was no longer just a diplomatic footnote. It was a reckoning made flesh. And as species scrambled to surrender, beg, or run, they all began whispering the same question. What happens when she gets free? They were too late to realize. She already was. It started with fireless destruction. No sound, no smoke, no survivors. Just absence. Whole fleets vanished. Infrastructure unraveled as if it had never been. And across 599 civilizations, a realization clawed its way into every mind like ice in the bloodstream. They had picked a fight with something they didn't understand. This wasn't retaliation. This was precision. And humanity hadn't even started talking yet. The first to plead were the Tsorthian swarm lords, whose crystalline cities blinked offline within 2 days. They sent a delegation to Earth, filled with groveling emissaries and offerings of technology never before shared. No response. Then the Creel Dominion, those arrogant architects of Leora's prison, sent 100 ships to parley. Half were destroyed by an invisible force before exiting hyperspace. The rest returned empty, crewless, drifting through the void with a single message burned into their hulls. You chained her. Now watch everything you build unravel. And it did. The unraveling was slow, deliberate. Not just military targets, but cultural icons, trade centers, memory vaults, the soul of each species, cut away piece by piece. And yet, not one child was harmed. Not one civilian city glassed. This was not genocide. This was surgical humiliation. Earth was sending a message, clear as thunder. You will survive this, but you will never be proud again. Back in the core of the Concord, the once mighty Senate, once brimming with pomp and ego, had turned into a panic room. The same aliens who had laughed during Leora's sentencing now sat trembling under reinforced domes, watching reports roll in. Zarnathi orbital stations, gone. Hydrax planetary shield network, corrupted. Cythery sky vaults, emptied. Every major power who raised a hand to vote against Leora was now bleeding status, stability, and certainty. One senator from the Brellan theocracy collapsed on the chamber floor, screaming, "I was told they were peaceful. You told me humans had boundaries." Another tried to shoot himself mid-session. His gun jammed. The whisper on the air said Earth had jammed every suicide device in the galaxy. Why? Because death was mercy, and Earth wasn't dealing in mercy anymore. Meanwhile, deep in the Dominion transport en route to a penal colony, Leora Dane sat alone in her prison cell, but not powerless. Far from it. She was still wearing her chains, yes, but the ship, it had become her stage. The guards had stopped speaking to her, not because they didn't want to, but because whenever she looked at them, they felt their lungs tighten, as if the air around her had learned to judge. They'd tried drugging her. She didn't flinch. They turned off gravity. She meditated. They blasted noise into her cell. She hummed louder. One guard said later, it was like trying to contain a star in a glass jar. And then it happened. Day 12, Galactic Standard. The Dominion vessel dropped out of hyperspace above the penal moon of Bex 17. A secure hellhole designed for creatures who couldn't be reasoned with. A place where prisoners weren't watched, because they didn't survive long enough to need surveillance. But as the ship entered orbit, alarms blared. Not from Earth. From inside the ship, the engines melted without flame. The navigation system blinked into binary poetry. The hull twisted into a shape that shouldn't exist in 3 dimensions. And in her cell, Leora Dane stood up. Not walked, not stumbled. Stood like a judge ascending her bench. The chains disintegrated, dissolving into mist that coiled around her fingertips like serpents waiting for a command. She stepped forward. The doors hissed open, not unlocked, but ashamed to stay closed. No explosions. No resistance. The crew simply knelt when they saw her. The ship didn't crash. It bowed, and the skies of Bex 17 rippled with a single transmission in every galactic tongue. She has risen. Back on Earth, humanity didn't cheer. There were no parades, no celebrations. This wasn't victory. This was correction. A universal recalibration of arrogance. The Black Accord, Earth's silent overseer of war and peace, confirmed her safety. It didn't dispatch her a ship. It gave her control of every fleet, every drone, every protocol. Leora Dane had gone from captive to commander with a breath. And her first order? She sent out a single galactic-wide message. Her voice as calm as snowfall, but twice as cold. You were given a chance to coexist. You chose chains. Now you will carry the weight of your vote for 1,000 years. The begging began in earnest now. Planets lined up to surrender, to apologize, to worship. They sent fleets not to fight, but to kneel. Empires started burning their own flags, renouncing past alliances, issuing reparations in hopes of appeasing humanity's wrath. Some offered to put their own leaders on trial. Some executed them publicly. One race even sterilized its ruling class, declaring they were not fit to pass on weakness. Still, Earth said nothing. Still, Leora said nothing, because silence is the deepest kind of justice. On the 15th day, she returned, not to Earth, but to the Grand Council chamber. No guards escorted her. No weapons flanked her. She walked alone into a room that once humiliated her, and the delegates, without command, fell to their knees. Even the High Chancellor, once smug with his feathered arrogance, collapsed in sobs. I didn't know, he whispered. Leora looked at him, then at the rest. "Didn't you?" she replied. And that was it. She turned, walked past them, and left behind a silence that would haunt the chamber forever. The message was clear. This wasn't about vengeance. This was the end of illusion. The illusion that humans were soft. The illusion that kindness meant weakness. The illusion that chains could ever hold what Earth had become. They thought they had seen wrath. They hadn't seen Leora Dane walk back into galaxy, unchained. No fanfare. No banners. No fleets trailing smoke and victory songs. Just a single woman, wrapped in silence in the cold glow of stars, stepping foot onto the same council floor where her chains once clinked and her sentence was sealed. And behind her, the galaxy held its breath, because they all remembered how she walked in last time, escorted, mocked, bound by 1,000 lies. But this time, she walked in as a storm barely held in human skin. She wore no armor. She carried no weapon. And yet, every being in that chamber felt the weight of 1,000 burning worlds press against their spine when she entered. Even the air bent around her, like it was ashamed of what it once bore witness to. Every delegate, those who had voted, those who had watched, those who had smiled, fell silent. Leora's eyes swept across them, not in rage, in judgment. And judgment is colder than fury. She stopped at the center of the chamber, the same spot where she had been sentenced like a criminal. She looked at the curved wall of seats above her, each housing the so-called rulers of empires. And then she spoke. "I didn't return to be heard. I came so you could listen to your silence." She paused, not for effect, for the weight of truth to settle on every coward soul. You didn't just vote against a woman. You didn't just betray Earth. You voted to cage what you never understood. And now you know understanding came too late. Not a single delegate dared speak. Many couldn't meet her eyes. Some wept, some trembled, but all listened, because this wasn't a speech. This was a verdict. She turned slowly, as if giving the room a chance to truly see her. Not the woman in chains, not the ambassador they dismissed, but the living memory of every sin they tried to bury. "I offered peace. You chose power. I offered unity. You chose control. I offer my voice, and you took it as weakness. So now, I offer you the gift your vote earned. Memory, unfading, unforgiving." And then she reached for nothing. Not a weapon, not a tool, just emotion. And in response, the walls of the chamber lit up a projection. Scenes of the vote. Footage they thought sealed, erased, hidden. One by one, their faces appeared. Their nods, their yes votes, their silence. You thought history would forget. You didn't realize I became history. Across the galaxy, those same projections appeared on every public screen, in marketplaces, in classrooms, in temples and command centers. There were no edited versions, no lies, just truth, unfiltered, raw. Children watched their leaders condemn an innocent woman. Soldiers saw the monsters they protected. Entire cultures cracked at the seams, not from war but from shame. And Earth simply let the truth speak, because justice doesn't always come from weapons. Sometimes it comes from making the enemy look in the mirror and not recognize what stares back. But Leora wasn't done, because her return wasn't about vengeance. It was about transformation. She turned back to the council and raised her voice, not in fury, but in absolute, unwavering control. "The Concord you built is dead, not because we destroyed it, but because it proved unworthy of survival." Gasps, whispers. The Supreme Chancellor opened his mouth, perhaps to protest, but her stare froze the words in his throat. She continued, "From this day forward, Earth will not serve your vision. It will reshape it. A new accord will rise, one built not on control, but on consequence. No species shall ever again raise shackles in the name of law." And then she dropped it, the vote crystal, the original shard containing the recorded decision to enslave her, recovered from the archives of the Creel Dominion. It shattered against the chamber floor, and the sound echoed like thunder through the bones of the guilty. Outside the chamber, the galaxy changed. Earth's ships did not invade. They patrolled. They watched. They made it known. This was no longer a galaxy of cowards and backroom politics. This was a galaxy under the eye of consequence. No more legal slavery. No more forced manipulation through diplomacy. No more hiding behind the illusion of civil vote. Every treaty would now have one final clause, and if violated, Earth will remember. Later that night, Leora stood alone on the balcony of the old council tower, overlooking a city that once sentenced her. Now it bowed. She didn't smile. She didn't bask. She simply breathed the air. Behind her, a young alien girl, barely waist-high, stepped forward, not to protest, not to beg, but to ask, "Will you punish everyone, Ambassador?" Leora looked down. "No," she said softly. "Only those who choose not to change." And for the first time in days, she did smile, not because they feared her, but because someone had finally understood her. You can survive a war. You can survive a planet burning. You can even survive the collapse of your empire. But you cannot survive being remembered by the one you tried to erase. That's what the galaxy learned in the days that followed. Because once Leora Dane returned, she didn't build a throne. She built a mirror and forced the galaxy to look at itself. At first, they tried to rewrite it. Species sent out broadcasts claiming they were misled, that the vote had been misunderstood, that we never meant harm. But Earth already had the data, archived, unedited, undeniable. Leora didn't bother to argue. She didn't raise a fleet. She raised a record. In the center of the rebuilt council spire, she installed something no one could delete. A single monument, a tall, obsidian obelisk. It bore no symbols, no flags, no names, just a playback crystal, repeating the vote. Every nod, every word, every smug grin, 24 hours a day, for every child to see. Empires fell from within, not from missiles or drones, but from shame. Students questioned their teachers. Soldiers laid down their arms. Faith leaders wept as they confessed to their flocks. What have we become? Was whispered across moons, stations, palaces. And Earth? Earth never fired again, because they didn't need to. They had let the galaxy condemn itself. But justice, real justice, isn't just memory. It's transformation. Leora Dane knew this. So she returned once more, this time not to the council chamber, but to the people, to the broken colonies, to the enslaved fringe species of Concord had long ignored, to the children born in shadow because their species were deemed less evolved. And she said the words no one had ever said to them. "We see you now. You are not forgotten. You are part of what comes next." She created a new accord, not just with Earth, but with the survivors, the discarded, the silent. They called it the Pact of Dawn. It wasn't built in palaces. It wasn't written in gold. It was forged in pain, signed in truth. No species could join without first admitting their crimes, not just against Earth, but against those they trampled to rise. And the first law? No voice may be silenced by vote. The second? No being may be bound without a hearing held in full light. And the third? If violated, Earth will not respond. Earth will end. Leora never returned to her old post as Earth's ambassador, because Earth no longer needed one. They had her story, and the galaxy would never forget. Entire star systems changed their education systems to include what came to be known simply as the chain vote. Holographic museums opened with her projected image, telling the full story from her cell to her return. Some tried to ban it. They failed, because even the attempt to hide her story proved her point. Truth cannot be chained. Years passed. Some planets still struggled to accept the past. But most didn't just remember. They transformed. The Sorthians rewrote their constitution to ban species caste politics. The Creel Dominion, once her captors, converted their slave processing stations into memory gardens open to the public. And the Scytheri, the ones who read the original sentence, their ruler abdicated, saying, "We were not worthy of her presence, much less her punishment." And Leora? She disappeared from the public eye. Some say she returned to Earth and walked into the mountains, never to be seen again. Others say she took a small ship, no bigger than a freighter, and travels the stars alone, visiting forgotten, planting seeds of peace where war once grew. There are stories, sightings, myths, but they all share one thing. When she appears, she brings no army, just words, and the weight of a memory that reshaped galaxies. On the anniversary of the vote, a strange tradition emerged. Planets would turn off their lights for 60 seconds. Every screen, every beacon, every ship, plunging entire systems into a hush of black, not in mourning, in remembrance. For 1 minute each year, the galaxy remembers the silence of a woman wronged, and the sound that followed when she came back not as a victim, but as the reckoning. They call it the Long Night, and across every system, in every language, the phrase has been etched into the stones of history. We tried to bind the diplomat, but we only unshackled the storm. Let the universe remember, she did not raise her voice to threaten. She did not swing her hand to strike. She simply stood, endured, and then returned with her truth bare like a blade. And that was enough to bring every empire to its knees. Forever.